Hey, welcome to Postpartum. We're talking and digesting Jessica's episode. So I had written down some questions. I don't know if you had any.
I wrote down notes too.
Yeah, awesome.
We have notes.
So I just wanted to ask, when you said that PCOS runs in families, does that mean on men's side too?
No.
I mean, I understand men probably can't get PCOS.
You mean, can they like carry it?
Yeah, like if your father had it, or
I don't think
the
so.
gene or something.
I've never heard anything like that, but don't quote me because I'm not a medical expert in all things PCOS. But I've never heard of that.
Or like if his mom had it, then could it affect you? Okay.
Like I don't think so.
Yeah. Okay.
And I wonder too if there are other is it purely genetic, or are there environmental factors that play into it as well? Like hormones in food.
There are definitely, that's something I didn't talk about at all. There are a lot of things with hormones in food, and one thing in particular is I don't eat soy because soy actually blocks your estrogen receptors. I think it's estrogen receptors in your body, so that your estrogen doesn't properly go to those receptors because they're already blocked with soy.
Which is funny you say that, because I heard somebody just casually say, yeah, boys aren't supposed to eat soy because it makes them grow breasts, but that sounds like the opposite of what you're saying.
Yeah, no.
Which, I mean, it sounds a little outlandish anyway, but I mean, I just feel like that's like...
I'm going to go out on a limb and say no. Boys can eat soy. But yeah, that is one thing that I do avoid in eating. And then there's also products as well. We can't really afford to eat organically or do all natural products in everything, but I try to do as much as I can because deodorants, shampoos, things like that, those can all affect PCOS as well. Wow. So interesting. There's a lot that goes into it.
I wonder if that's maybe why it took so long for us to get a really good understanding of it, because maybe it wasn't as severe in a lot of women.
Yeah, could be.
Because our food was better and our products weren't as chemically.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah.
That's just a thought.
When you said that you were talking about weight gain or loss, and you're talking about being heavier is not healthy for the baby, what's the connection there?
There's just a lot of risks with pregnancy when you are overweight. There's some risks to the baby. I remember one doctor telling me, well, at least with PCOS and having higher testosterone levels, I had one doctor tell me that having high testosterone could lead to some types of autism and things like birth defects, and things can come from having a too high of a testosterone. So that's one thing. I can probably look it up and talk for a whole nother episode on the negativities of pregnancy and childbirth with being overweight. There's a lot of things that can happen with that. But yeah, does that answer your question?
Yeah, that does. Yeah. Thank you. Did you have one?
Yeah. I just thought it was so interesting when you were talking about fertility issues and saying TJ got tested to see if he was good, if everything is working right. And it dawned on me how, I don't know, men's fertility is pretty straightforward. Mm-hmm. It's basically, do you have enough swimmers and do they swim?
Mm-hmm.
And that's what you need. And with women, it's so complicated. Yeah. There's a number of things that could be wrong, and one thing could be off balance that affects everything, and it's just not fair.
It's like if a woman was the car and the man provides the gasoline.
Yeah, exactly. That's exactly right.
It's like so much perfect. More involved with trying to make and house a baby. Yeah.
And so I'm sure that a lot of moms or women feel this way when they're experiencing infertility, but it's also important to step back and realize, okay, there's a lot more intricacies that go into this on my end than on my spouse's end, and I should just cut myself a break. Cut yourself a break. Because...
And it doesn't all just have to do with your reproductive organs. I mean, there's so many, diseases and syndromes and things that do affect your uterus or your ovaries, but they're, like I said, mine is completely hormonal and affects so many things, this domino effect of things that you just can feel often like you're drowning in it, like there's like you just can't fix it all. And that's when I figured out and found out that the weight gain was the core of it, and that if I could just focus on that and tackle that, then a lot of other things would kind of figure themselves out. And I think it's important to to try to do that, but at the same time, try to remember that you are a wonderful person and that this doesn't reflect on you in any way. I had issues as well during this time of just feeling like I wasn't meant to be a mother because I am a horrible person, or I would make a horrible mother, or whatever it is. You know, I put a lot of anger and frustration onto God for why it wasn't happening for me. And, you know, there's just a lot that goes into that. And then just eventually healed and came to the realization that things happen the way they happen for a reason, and honestly was the best timing for us. Looking back now, having Jamie come at this time in our lives was the best. We were financially stable. We owned our own home. My sister turned 18 2 months after he was born, so she'll be moving out shortly. We won't have to deal with having a teenager in our home as well. And I mean, there's just so many things that lined up to make this really the perfect time. And I felt like me as a person, as a wife, and as a mother I am in a much better spot now than I was over the years. So, in my opinion, he knows what he's doing. But even if you don't believe in God, the universe, whatever it is, whatever you believe in, things do happen in a timely manner for a reason. Yeah.
You've talked about, during the episode, you talked about having a decade of not being pregnant. And in the past, you've talked about being skeptical, not only during this podcast, but just in conversation. And I can understand that. Like, it's a reality. Like, it's not just a hope or whatnot, or a disbelief or whatever. It's like, this has been your reality for, I mean, a large majority of your life, a large percentage, you know, of your life. And so that's really understandable why you are, I don't want to put words in your mouth, so you can correct me, but maybe second guessing things the doctors are saying, or taking things in your own hands, because if you had just sat around and waited for somebody to tell you the answer, like you were the victim or whatever, you wouldn't maybe be in this position.
Right. If I hadn't done any research on my own, I would have been on birth control until we decided to have kids, and then we would have gone and tried IVF. I mean, that probably would have been, we might have done Clomid, because doctors usually say, well, try Clomid first and then we'll do IVF. And maybe Clomid would have worked. A lot of women with PCOS do go on to Clomid and do get pregnant. And so maybe that would have happened first. But that was basically the road. And I would have been overweight still, and I would have been pregnant and had my baby at overweight. I probably would have gained more weight during my pregnancy. I mean, I'm sure it would not have been as good as it was with me doing my own research.
Yeah. And I bet there are women out there that would benefit from hearing your story, because I'm sure that some women have to go onto Clomid. Losing weight does not do it for them. But I also think that a lot of times doctors get medication happy and say, oh, okay, we'll try this. And instead of losing, I really feel like, I don't feel like this, but I could guess that you went into pregnancy physically and mentally more healthy than you would have if you had tried those medications.
Yeah, absolutely.
Speaking of healthy, you had said it's unhealthy to not have a period for so long. Why is that?
So the uterine lining builds up when you are not menstruating, right? It builds up, and then you have your menstrual cycle, and that it kind of sloughs off and comes out, and that's what your period is. When you don't have a period, at least in my case, my uterine lining kept building up. So it was, I think, when I had my first abdominal ultrasound, my doctor said that my uterine lining was like 10 times thicker than it should be. Like, it was almost pregnancy thick, which is very unhealthy, can definitely lead to uterine cancers and things like that. And so that was, and then when I went on birth control, after not having my period for that year, I went on birth control, had my first menstrual cycle. It felt very similar to childbirth. It was not pleasant at all. So and I had very terrible cramps. I mean, my cramps at that point, I think, were worse than my contractions. In my initial contractions, not necessarily during the transition time of labor, but but like my initial contractions up to, like I said, up to that 8 centimeters, definitely my cramps at that point in my life I had to be on some serious pain medications to kind of get through it. And luckily it was short. It was only like the first day that was really that painful, but yeah, so there's
Still
a lot of
24
issues
hours of that, if that was the case.
There's a lot of issues. So if you are someone who is going without your period and just feeling like, yeah, this is great, I don't have to worry about it or whatever, like, no, take care of it. It's not good. It's not good.
Right. And I know we've talked about her in the past, but and I don't even know her actual name, but Just Ingredients. Oh, I think it's like Caroline or something like that. But anyway, on Instagram, that's her handle. But she talks about listening to your body. Like, you had said something else in your episode that if your period's irregular, like you should get that checked out. And if you're having really bad cramps, like that's your body actually telling you something. I'm sure, did you two both also believe growing up, like that's just part of the game? Like you just had miserable periods because women have periods and they're going to be crampy. I mean, I just thought that was normal.
Yeah.
And
I always thought it was like preparation for childbirth.
Yeah.
I was like, I'm not taking any medication because I'm not going to get an epidural and I will be ready.
I'm going to own this because I went through years of, And then when I heard the concept that you don't, like that might be something's off or something could be adjusted. Well, first I thought it was just like, whatever, who like, people that, I can't think of the word, kind of like voodoo, but not.
Granola hippies?
Yeah, exactly. Just kind of like, okay, maybe if I just believe or something like that, like
meditate the cramps away.
Yeah, exactly. And I just kind of dismissed it if I ever heard it. But then my later years, when I realized like your body responds to a lot of things and your hormones are affected by a lot of things that you don't actually necessarily need to be feeling. I do think that it may be possible there's going to be some level of pain and cramping every period. I feel like that's probably likely if your body's sloughing it off.
But if it's excruciating, right, you can get help with that. I remember my grandma telling me at some point that her periods were so excruciating. I think she got a hysterectomy or something after having her 3 kids or something like that. She was just like every month was just on the floor rolling, crying in pain. That's not good.
Yeah.
It's not normal.
Right. Yeah. So is that what you mean? Getting help means a hysterectomy?
Not necessarily. But I mean, this was back in 1970 something. So I'm sure they didn't know anything about anything periods back then.
Right. So I have a little bit lighter of a question. So if you have any others that you want to ask first.
I have a couple questions. Yeah. Well, just comments. After you delivered, you said you cried.
Mm-hmm.
After I delivered, I don't know if I mentioned this in my story, but I too cried. And people are like, and I remember watching birth stories and being like, oh, it's so sweet. They cry because they love their baby. That did not cross my mind. I cried because it was over. I was like, oh my gosh, it's done. Thank goodness. Because
I think it was a mixture of the two things.
Yeah. I cried later because I loved Emmett. But at first I was like, oh, freak this. I can't. This is the worst.
Yeah, it was pretty rough. It was pretty that, especially because he was so big and so stuck, and the doctor was like, TJ told me she had her hands like up in there, and she was like, I don't know, ripping and pulling is what he would describe. Thankfully, she didn't, and that was one of the reasons why I really liked her, because she was not necessarily against episiotomies and other interventions like that, but she just felt like they were necessary when they were necessary, and she wasn't going to go and just cut me because I had a big baby, and I really appreciated that. But yeah, it was pretty difficult getting his head out, and he had like a really fat red mark on his forehead, and then even his shoulder got stuck on my pubic bone, so he was like favoring his shoulder a little bit when he first came out. But I cried a lot because he was crying. And I just felt I was so happy to see him, and I also wanted to just comfort him, and a wave of emotions of yes, it was over finally. And I think it's hard to even describe. I feel like there's so many emotions at that point, you just can't even.
And then my last thing,
go for it.
I remember my parents did foster care growing up, and at one point we had this mom with a baby, and she was struggling, and so I would wake up with the baby at night. I did a lot for this baby. I would feed him bottles. I would change his diapers. So I also, when I got home from when I was preparing to deliver, I was like, I've got this mom thing down. I know how to take care of a baby, and I did. But it's so different when, at least for me, when you go home and you're so broken, just worn down
Yeah.
from 9 months of carrying this child and from a very physically tolling labor.
Mhm.
Right? It's just yeah. And I remember the hospital thinking, I just want to get home. I just want to get home. I just want to sleep in my bed. And then getting home and feeling like I just want to go back.
I feel
need
like
to go
that's
back.
the ultimate joke is
Yeah.
like not only having to take care of a newborn and nurse them every 1 to 2 hours or whatever you do as a mom, but also having to end pregnancy and the whole labor experience, whatever. But then you have to recover.
Mm-hmm.
The recovery while taking care of the newborn is just a joke.
Yeah.
Who decided that this would, you should be immediately better, in my opinion. When I create a
You
world
should be
and
the
women,
strongest ever.
you should just be immediately recovered. Like,
Yeah.
yes, you're great and you can go. And some women are like that. Some women have, beautiful natural childbirths
Yep.
and they recover within a few hours. And
Yep.
I was not that way.
Nope.
No
Nope.
way.
Nope. I watched home birth videos before I to bring in the good vibes
Me
and
too.
see. And I remember watching this lady that had her baby and she's like, I took some ibuprofen and I'm feeling good. And I'm like, that's going to be me. Holy crap. That was not me.
No.
It was literally the opposite. I was like, there's no way I'm ever going to feel normal ever.
There's no way I'm ever going to
again.
poop normal again. Can I just say we should have an episode on postpartum recovery
It's
because
so
I
much.
seriously felt that. I was like, this is my new life. This is what when I go to the bathroom, this is how I need to act. And thankfully that is not the case. But yeah, initially I had to do so many things. I had the pad and the tucks and just like all the stuff they give you at the hospital.
Setting it up
and
too is just hard.
Yeah.
I got home and everyone's tired. My mom's tired. Eden's tired. And I just broke down. I was like, I need you guys to help me. I can't. You guys are fine. You can go lay in your beds and go to sleep. I have to set up food. I have to get water. I have to do my medications, which are like 1,000 that I'm supposed to be taking because of all the things. And then I have to set up this station in the bathroom. And on top of that, I'm supposed to be breastfeeding a baby and taking care of it. Like, you don't get it.
Timing all and counting how many diapers they have. And,
It was just so overwhelming, the amount of things. And then that would be overwhelming for me on a regular, when I'm feeling good and a regular day, much less after I've just done the most physically exhausting 48 hours of my life. It's
another reason why I should have stayed longer in the hospital.
But you don't
I
know
just
that.
didn't even think about it.
You don't
I was
think
like,
of
all right,
it.
whatever.
You just want to get home and start life.
I don't
'cause you love
need
this baby.
the nurses anymore. Jamie's healthy. I'm done with whatever they needed to do to me. So time to go. I shouldn't have done that.
No.
I wanted to stay as long as possible.
Yeah, you were smart.
I know. I was like, how long? I was calling my insurance and I was like, how long are you going to approve? And they do their spiel about like what's approved and what's not. And I was like, yeah. Okay, so tell me, am I approved? And they're like, well, technically, I'm like hanging up on them. I'm like, they said I'm approved. And they're like, all right. I was just like, they can't say yes, you're approved until they know what the doctors are saying. But I wanted to mention that I watched the show Yummy Mummies, as I've probably told you guys about, on Netflix. And I understand that they're like disgustingly rich, but they go and they're in this recovery
Wing.
whatever.
Sweet.
like ward whatever for like 6 weeks.
What?
Like they have this extended thing.
6 weeks?
Yeah, something crazy. So they're probably like, I mean, their baby's like ready to go off.
Yeah.
To graduate high school and stuff like that by that point. But I know that could be like a special thing they're paying for, but I don't think it's as far-fetched. I think it's probably a lot more
I think 2 weeks would have
average.
been awesome. I think after 2 weeks is when I started feeling a little bit more normal.
Yeah.
But again, we realistically couldn't have lived our lives for 2 weeks.
Right,
I don't know
right.
how they pick up in.
well, and this only the mother went there, but they had like,
okay.
but regardless, what I meant to say is that I think that in other countries, I mean, other first, what is that called? Third world, first world,
developed,
developed countries, they have, other than America, they have things like this.
Yeah.
And I could be wrong to the extent of what these Yummy Mummies experienced, but compared to every other Australian, but I know somebody, or I had met somebody rather, through Fit for Mom, here in Utah who she attended one class and then she just disappeared. And I was like, whatever happened to her? And they said, oh, she went to Australia to have her baby. And I was like, what? And they're like, well, she's Australian. And I was like, well, she didn't sound it. But regardless, I did not understand why they would go. And then I learned that she got like she got to deliver for free for one thing. And I know that that's a little bit political. There's a whole lot to that. And I'm not necessarily making a statement about socialized medicine or anything right now, except that I do believe they probably have a lot longer to recover.
Yeah.
I think that's probably a lot more like comfortable. Like this particular mom said that they have like this room that they all go to and like learn how to nurse together. And I know we've talked about lactation stuff. So I just felt like it's like they've zeroed in on, I mean, there's a lot of things that I don't agree with about Australia culturally, but I think that they've like got that on lock.
I think America in general is unfortunately behind when it comes to women's health and pregnancy and childbirth, which I think we're catching up. I think we're learning more, but I think there's a lot of countries out there who have it right or have it better than we do when it comes to that.
This is my announcement that I'm leaving and going to Australia so I can have my next baby under their residency. JK, but maybe not. Well, thanks again, Jess, for sharing.
And
thank
you guys.
Gathering that information, and we're glad we got to do this postpartum. So thank you for listening. Tune in next week.